Hi everyone, my name is Daphne Thomson and I help local governments achieve efficiencies and productivity by the use of AI. And today I have the utmost pleasure of speaking to Megan Chorlton, the president of the MIABC. Megan, welcome for being here.
Well, thank you. It's really nice to see you again, Daphne.
It is. I absolutely love that chat that we had at the NCGLA, and that sparked so much conversation. So I just thought we have to have a recorded one that everyone can listen to, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So let's chat about what is the MIA just briefly and how that does help local government.
Absolutely. So the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia, we provide liability insurance, property insurance, and then specialty coverage like cyber insurance to our members. We're a not-for-profit insurance company, meaning that our members are only local governments in British Columbia, and they pool their insurance premiums together to provide coverage for each other. So we offer a lot of added value services our members can't get in the commercial market, things like risk management tools, training, and other added value services. And because, it's the MIABC is essentially owned or run by local governments, our whole mandate is to ensure that your insurance premiums or your costs remain stable and a predictable line item on your budget, and that we develop that truly municipal or local government expertise to be able to advise you as to how to manage your risks. And so members feel very trusting and assured that we're helping their fellow local governments to manage the risk when they're all the risks are pooled together.
So let's go a little bit deeper into that risk management. We all know that AI is now coming in, and it is amazing and it is great, but it does come with a lot of additional opportunity and exposure. So how do we mitigate that risk?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a number of years ago, it was I think at the end of 2022 when ChatGPT was released, and AI just exploded on the scene. And one of the things that I was listening to a podcast earlier that early in 2023, and a business leader was talking on this podcast and said, you know what, you really can't wait to jump on the AI and become aware and educated about AI in your organization, because you may think that your staff are not using AI, and they are. And so the best thing you can do is acknowledge that and put some guardrails around that through having a clear AI use policy in your organization. So thinking about, where are you going to allow AI use? Where are you going to allow for some experimentation? And then where do you want to put those guardrails and say, these are areas in which we are absolutely not going to allow AI to, things like make certain decisions, or we're not going to allow certain types of business information, local government information, certainly personal information, into certain types of AI tools. So once you have that clear policy in place, it's a great risk management tool so that you can proceed and explore all the opportunities that AI brings.
So let's go into what that policy should look like. And I know that you guys have a phenomenal examples of what AI policies could look like. So when I'm chatting to some of the local governments, I try and steer them away from specifically mentioning all the specific platforms, because AI is changing so extremely fast. I mean, a month ago, ChatGPT was almost a no-go, and now it's combined with Copilot as the brain of ChatGPT, but within the secure framework. So if you put in there no ChatGPT, does that mean now you can't use the the GPT-5 function within Copilot? So what would you say about that?
Well, I think there's two things that you want to consider when you're when you're creating the policy. First of all, you do want to be able to draft the policy so that it's future forward, so that you're thinking about, okay, what are the guardrails that we're putting around it? But at the same time not having to, and you want to be able to update your policy, and that's part number two, is you do want to iteratively update your policy, but you don't want to be updating your policy at the rate that the technology is changing, because it's changing so quickly. So if you put in a provision that says, for instance, staff and elected officials at our local government can use AI tools that are approved by and whoever's doing your approval process, by our IT department or by the CAO or whoever it is, then that allows you to evolve your use of AI, but still maintain guardrails around that use. Go ahead.
So if we look at that specific transparency and telling everyone, all right, but this, we're using AI for this, we're using AI for that. Now, my point of view is, because it's kind of getting to a stage where it's assumed we are using AI for minute taking or for document creation, that we as humans become the editor. Where's the line where you tell people, well, I used AI in Canva to make this image, versus it is just assumed that you use a GPS to get somewhere, or Google Maps. So it's like, where's that balance of being overly transparent and overloading people versus just, hey, we are making use of AI, for example, analytical purposes? Or what would you say is the best practice in that aspect?
I mean, I think it is really just about being open about how you're using AI, generally speaking. You don't have to necessarily detail every use of AI, but you do have to kind of consider, you do want to be open and transparent about it. And then also, if you are experimenting with AI, be able to share that, with your community, certainly with your council. You want your council on board, or your regional district board on board, to ensure that, that there is that level of transparency in place. There's different risks, and the risks of use, vary depending on how you're using the AI. So, you can look at exploratory learning, that's pretty low risk. Things like transcribing meeting notes are moderate risk, and then really high risk activities are where you are actually making decisions that impact people in your community, people in your staff. And so you want to make sure that when you're drafting your policy, you're considering allowing for these activities to happen, but also controlling the risks around it.
I want to delve a little bit deeper into that key aspect that you said about decision making, because that's where the human oversight is extremely important. When we do, for example, procurement, I mean, that is an amazing example for AI to assist us in just analyzing or sorting out different bids. For example, if we put out a RFP and we get 30 bids back, how do we really sort through all of that it is a unbiased thing, but that the decision is still the responsibility of the human, and that AI did not make that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you think about, how do you control risk? So we've talked about that first way of, implementing trustworthy AI. So having someone evaluate the AI in your organization and say, okay, you can use this AI. And then the other part of it is that scope of use. And so when you are, let's say, looking at procurement bids, and you may ask the AI, well, okay, here's our RFP and the requirements of the RFP, and then here are all the responses. Tell me sort through these and give me a list of all of the RFPs that comply with all of the requirements, right? All of the responses that require, and then which are the ones that don't, right? And how do they not comply?
And then you as human can go and double check that if it's actually accurate.
Exactly, that's right. And then you look at it, and then you're the one, what's your recommendation for which bid we should accept? And then it will give you a recommendation. Why is that your recommendation? But then you as a human go and you look at it and you think, okay, I agree with that recommendation, or I don't agree with that recommendation. Very much the same way your council or regional district board reviews staff reports. It's ultimately, they're the decision makers for certain decisions. They may go with staff's recommendation or not, but they need to be able to exercise that decision making role, right?
Exactly.
And power. Yeah.
What I currently love about, if you use a tool, for example, Copilot, in that every prompt is now trackable, so that if there's an FYI request and the vendor goes, hey, why wasn't I chosen for this? Now there's an actual audited track record to state, well, this is the prompts, this is what it said, and we now as human went and had the discussion, and here's the minutes for that discussion, for example, in order to prove why a vendor didn't get it.
Yeah. When you're exercising that decision-making power, I think one thing that's really important to remember is that AI, there is bias embedded in AI. Okay?
And that was actually my next point. So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you now, let's chat about the biases, because AI can be smoking shrooms on weekends and come up with the most ridiculous things. We all know that. How do we mitigate that risk of any kind of bias that plays in? And then at the same time, humans also have unnoticed or blind spot and biases that we don't even know about. So how do we mitigate that risk?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. You're right. I think in dealing with AI, it is very similar to checking our own personal biases, right? When we're making decisions. So, AI's got bias in the way it's trained. AI has been trained on the information that is available in its training pool, right? So if you've got a closed AI system, you're training it on your own information. If you've got AI that is accessing the web, the internet, it's training on that sort of greater data set. And so you've got to think about, okay, what biases already exist in the set that it's training on. And that's going to limit its responses, because it's predicting based on its training, the training information, what the right response should be. It's not independently thinking the way a human independently thinks.
It doesn't have context or even corporate memory.
Right, exactly. So you've got to think about just the way you think about your own systemic bias. I'm making this decision. You make a hiring decision and you think, okay, well, this is the best candidate and sometimes we have to step back and say, do we think this is the best candidate because they are male or because they are of a certain age, or are we bringing our own internal biases to this decision-making process and think through that and be aware of it? And I think that's what you do with AI as well, right? Is that you just sort of think through and think about, what biases could be impacting the information that we're getting.
So you touched on a really crucial point, that AI is training, and that's where it gets information from, but so are humans. So within the policy, one aspect that I really hone down on and is very important for me is the training aspect, but not just training as in, hey, how do we use the system, or what is the biases or whatever from AI, but also the training of our cognitive abilities. Because the more we use AI, the lazier we get. The more humans are all inherently lazy. So if we get the easiest way to do something, like we're going to the gym, we stop, we're lifting weights, we're going to lose the muscle. If a pilot stop doing manual landings, they will lose the skill set of landing a plane in an emergency. And so is our cognitive ability. So how would you address that within a policy or within the training section? And is that even something that you would put in a policy?
You can certainly put a reference to it in policy, but I think that it's about developing organizational culture and a culture of professionalism, and ensuring that your staff are trained to know, that even if they are using AI and as an assistive tool, they still need to be reviewing the work product. And then we always exercise proportionality at the MIABC. So if we are, let's say we're using an AI tool, or we're not, we're just creating a document that's going to go to our board of directors at a board meeting, or so for it may be at a council meeting or regional district board meeting, you want to make sure all the information in there is correct, and that it's grammatically correct and there are no typos. But if you are preparing a quick summary of your thoughts, and you're using AI to address that going into a meeting that you want to share with others, you might not be putting 100% into reviewing that document, because what its intended purpose is. It's just to generate some discussion, and spark some ideas. And so you don't have to go 110%. You might be exercising 80%. So it's kind of matching that. What's the purpose for which we're going to use this product? And then how much, oversight do we need to exercise here? Particularly where someone is going to rely on the information that you're providing to make a decision. And that's kind of the key, right? Is you want to ensure
ethical use of it, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So if you're providing information, for instance, to members of the public, and they're using that information to make decisions, you want to ensure that the information that they're providing is correct. So I'll give you an example. We are working on Agentic AI here at the MIABC. And one of the things that we're working on is developing a contract review tool. So something where our members can take one of their contracts that they're entering into, look at the insurance and indemnity provisions, and that in that contract, and then look at our policy language and say, does the things that I'm being asked to ensure in this contract, are they covered by my policies with the MIABC? Now, we will not allow that to be member facing for members to interact with that agent until we are 100% sure that every time internally we are running that question through, that we are getting accurate information out, right? But we will use it internally and say to our staff, start using this agent to train it, and then see what's coming out, and then double check that with others in our organization before sharing that information with the member.
So you actually touch on really something that we all would do, is basically put a contract or a policy into an AI tool like a Copilot, and then just say, dumb it down so I understand it, right? Because that's a normal use of it. Or give me a summary bullet format, or change it so that a toddler can understand it, whatever the prompt may be. And you said something really important and very thought-provoking in our offline discussion about this. Would you mind just repeating that, and about how we would be able to move forward and still making use of AI because it is convenient, but not lose that crucial point?
Well, one thing I think our staff use AI for fairly frequently, and I've used it for myself, is how do I explain this really complicated concept to one of our members, or for our members? How do I explain this really complicated insurance concept to my council, my regional district board, or maybe a member of the public? And I think if you fully understand this concept, but you're having a difficult time articulating it, AI can be really useful, because it can provide, a succinct summary, and you read it and you say, yeah, that's right. If you can verify that, because you understand the concept yourself, absolutely, that's correct. I've also used it to try and figure out what my kids' homework is saying, right? Like, I'll throw in something and say, I don't understand this concept that they're explaining. The problem with that is that it may give me a summary, but I have no way of independently verifying it because I don't understand it in the first place. And so, so you've got to find a way of independently verifying it through a trusted source. So that may be, running another couple of searches, using a different AI tool, using a different source, asking someone when it comes to insurance concepts, or indemnity agreements and insurance. Please pick up the phone, call the MIABC, call your MIABC representative, and say, hey, does this track? Is this correct? I want to share this summary with my council or my board, or a member of the public. So yeah, I mean, I think that's, if you think you can verify the veracity of the statement yourself, then absolutely go ahead and use it. And if you don't, then just find an independent way of verifying it.
So we're coming to the end of our time here, but before we end, I'd love you to please explain what the role of the MIABC would be in AI becoming so embedded in local government operations.
Yeah, well, the MIABC provides risk management training for members and insurance coverage. So, so certainly we are, we've started providing training to our members. We had a whole AI stream at our last risk management conference. We've got a newsletter coming out in November. It's totally devoted to AI, and then AI risks, and then also opportunities. and again at our conference next year. And then we'll start offering more courses, online webinars on AI. If you have any risk management questions about AI, please pick up the phone and call us. We also provide cyber insurance coverage, which does cover AI, and our liability policy will cover some risks posed by AI. Say if you've got questions about coverage for risks that can arise from AI, just pick up the phone and give us a call. And then we're always developing new products for our members, new coverages. So we will be continuing to monitor the risks, monitor our members' exposures, and ensuring that they're completely covered when they need to be.
That's awesome. Megan, it's always such a honor to speak to you, and I know we can geek out on this all day long. I love it.
We could absolutely. It was really lovely to see you again, Daphne.
You too. Thank you so much, Megan. So if there's any other topics that you'd like us to chat about with the MIABC, please put it in the comments and we'd love to address that too. Have a great day.